Can you get us going there, Brian? All right.
All right, so, is this working now?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
working now.
All right, so going back to the purpose of why we're doing all this building and looking at our building, the purpose was to identify needs and address those needs that are related to the church's objectives. And keeping in mind the objectives were reaching those who are far from Christ and growing up disciples. If you recall, we had those two signs, and those kind of been our guiding objectives. Whenever we identified a need, we would bounce it off those two objectives. One of our guiding principle is to maintain unity throughout this process, to make sure that whatever we do, we're doing it as a church with a unified spirit. We did not want to have factions and fragment the church based off of a building project. That would just be counterproductive to our objectives. So in some ways, this is very, very good, but it's also, it slows the process down. It gives us these kind of checkpoints, which would be one of them today, is maintaining unity among the church. So going through the process, way back, like a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, we started by identifying all the needs in our church, looking at those objectives. And then we started working with an outside consultant to develop plans, drawings, designs, and ultimately costs. And then in the fall of 2017, we presented to you a large design with equally large cost. If you recall, this was the design, the plan, and it touched just about every aspect of the church, going all the way around except this room and the nursery. And we addressed the front of the church, the offices, Kid Town, Fellowship Hall, the gymnasium, and the youth room, and then the youth room entrance. It also included looking at our parking lot, some ancillary storage, and also real estate. Some of the adjacent property was for sale at that time. And when we rolled all that together, it was about just under $2 million. And that was this presentation in 2017. However, due to cost constraints, we had to prioritize. That dollar amount was just too much for our church to handle. So we looked at what our needs were, and we continued with these areas: the youth room, the children's area, the main entrance, and essentially the north parking lot, so half a parking lot. So why these areas? Why did they kind of rise to the top in our priority? Looking back at our goals of reaching those and also growing disciples, this is how they line up. So the youth room, we look at that as growing disciples. We needed that space to grow these young adults into mature Christians. It also met two other needs by restoring the fellowship hall. Again, that's something we can use to reach people outside church. It's something we can use for events to invite people, and at the same time, we can also help grow disciples within the church. The children's area, we have a security need there. It's just an open area. So this is something that helps us grow, but it also helps us reach. And this is kind of the next to our guests' comfort, and it's also due for a remodel. And when I say guest comfort, I don't necessarily mean that there's nice soft chairs and it looks nice. It's when a guest shows up here with a kid and has to drop them off, they want to feel comfortable that their children are being taken care of. A lot of times we interact with people like, okay, I dropped my kid off, where do I pick up my kid? So while they're here, they're not really sure what's going on over there. So that security helps us reach people. They feel comfortable coming here and bringing their children here. And it's due for a remodel. This is one of those things that's kind of outward reaching process. When people see that we're taking care of our church and updating our church, they're going to want to be part of our church. The main entrance, welcoming guests. This is part of reaching. Our entrance is it's a little disconnected. Part of it's dated, part of it's new. it's a little confusing as to what our main entrance really is, because we have a carport over there, but you're supposed to come in over here. And also, again, it's due for a remodel, just to kind of revamp how people come here, make it a little bit more welcoming, a little more usable. The parking lot, it's starting to become a safety issue. It's overlived its life for a couple decades, probably. We've been patching it together. There's more patches than parking lot at this point. And appearance. This is one of those things that's reaching people. When they pull into our parking lot and they see it's dilapidated, it's crumbly, they sort of get that first impression that, wow, they're not really investing in their church. Maybe this church isn't somewhere I want to be. When we met with one of our architects, they drove in and they drove around our church and like, wow, there's something wrong with this church. Then they got inside and they started seeing, wow, this place is alive. It's not matching the outside and the inside. So we want to make the outside as alive as the inside. So the process continued. We developed several iterations of the plans, going back and forth with our consultant, and developing costs along the way. And these costs were actually based off of contractor quotes. They weren't bids to do the work, but they were actual quotes from contractors who would do the work. Concurrent with this process, we were also looking at funding options, which we'll talk about a little bit, so we could kind of align our plan and our quotes and our costs and our funding. So late last year, we did a church presentation. I didn't have the final costing at that time. It turns out it was still too expensive. I got the costs afterwards. So we did it again. So we went through several more iterations of the costs and the planning, and then we decided on funding options at the same time. And that brings us to our current plan, which is this. Sticking with the youth room, you can see on the left side there, that's the current space. So those are the entrance doors that you'd go into that youth room. It basically doubles the size of that room. It takes it to the end of the gymnasium. So let's see if this works. Oh, sorry. There it goes. So that space highlighted on the right, that is all new space. It basically opens up the youth room. It also allows us to put new HVAC in that area. The ventilation is poor, especially when you fill it with kids. There's older boiler system in there. There's one window-mounted AC unit. So we would redo that and put in proper ventilation to house that much space and that much teenager. The other part is the children's area. The big change here from the previous presentation, which was driven by cost, is we're not going to be able to capture the courtyard for square footage. It was just really expensive option, pouring all that concrete and then basically building a new space in there. So in lieu of that, we would capture a larger room on the left reddish orange side. So that space right now is the fire department, I think it's Carol's office, the library, Sunday school room. There's those little bathrooms in between that you can't get to. So we would basically use that, open it all up for a children's area, and then move those bathrooms north. Does it have a pointer on it?
I don't know, probably not.
So the top of the screen. Basically moving those bathrooms north, closer to the bathrooms that are existing in the hallway. And that allows us to have restrooms for the kids that are within a secured area. And it also gives them a large open space. At the same time, it would be a remodel of the side on the right and the green side. So basically redoing that space as well. This includes new HVAC, new windows. It also includes redoing the lobby. It's not pictured on this image here. It'd be a little bit farther north to the top of the screen there, but opens up that space a little bit more as well. So it provides a larger open area, a little bit more security by closing off the north and south entrances there, and then a refresh and a remodel of that space. And this would be looking at the entrance where that carport is. So it involved removing that carport, putting in a set of windows and consolidating the doors. So you don't have this big expansive set of doors that people look at and assume that that's where they should be going. It's a double door and a set of new windows, and a little bit a newer facade. The main entrance, before we had a larger portico or carport type entrance that you could drive under. We had to scale that back to an entrance where you could just walk under. So you can see a side view of a car right there pulling up and dropping someone off, and the person would get dropped off under the overhang, but the car would not be under the overhang. It also involves centralizing some of our doors. Right now they're kind of spaced out, creating kind of a much more focused entrance point for visitors. When they show up, they see that, oh, this is where I should be going. It raises the front of that entrance a little bit, so it gives that facade of a little bit of higher building, a little different building material, so it kind of draws your attention to this area where I should be going. And then the parking lot, the north parking lot would be a remove and a replace. We can no longer just put a coat over top of it. It would be removing all that material, putting a new base or repurposing the material for a new base, and then replacing it with 3 to 4 inches of asphalt material. Now, the plan also includes some ancillary items that we can self-perform to save money. The first is the pole barn. This would involve taking down the old garage and then putting up a much larger pole barn that would house at least 2 of our buses. And this would be sort of back by the space where the fire pit is located right now. But this is something that's a self-perform. You can cut the cost in half by doing it ourselves. We just get the materials and do it. So volunteers are welcome. The coffee room, because we're not going to be able to open up the front here the way we wanted to, and that has to do a lot with the fire suppression system, we can still work with that coffee room and double that space by moving west into an existing office there. There's a nice wall where we just put that coffee bar. We would probably demolish that and move it over. But that doubles the space for that and allows us to use that area as a bookstore. As you recall, if we captured the library, we'd be losing that library space down in the Kidtown area. But this would allow us to have reading materials, books that are relevant to studies, that we have them available in this area. And then offices. We would start to bisect some of our larger offices. I've said it before, his office is way too big. So we would put some walls in there. They don't have to be load-bearing walls. It's just a matter of putting walls in there and separate entrances, and then we can capture some of the office space lost down in Kidtown and put in some newer offices, some more appropriately sized offices. The gym loft is still out there, but that's something we can do. Again, as part of this plan. If we do it ourselves, it'll save us a lot of money and it'll avoid some code regulations that if someone else does it, it's different. So if we do it ourselves, it'll be cheaper. All right, so this is the what's left behind, that they can still be saved.
I get it.
All right,
get
good.
it. Yep,
All right, good.
Yep. The movie.
Yeah.
The book.
Book, not
Yeah.
the movie.
The movie. Come on, Kirk Cameron. Come on.
Anyways, the south parking lot, that's still at the top of our list because that's just as bad as the north parking lot. So remember, half a parking lot here is like $200,000. South parking lot. The kitchen is not part of this plan. We did go through a design and we did cost it out. It was quite expensive. The remodel, we could probably do ourselves. The appliances are very expensive when you start putting in appliances for that space. The courtyards, so we're not capturing any of the courtyards at this time, but we still can if we ever want to. The real estate, that's still an option if that ever comes up again. The gym lobby, the gym remodel, and then one of the large items is the fire suppression. Only part of this building has fire suppression, which limits what we can remodel at this time. So if we ever wanted to do a lot of interior remodeling, we would have to address the fire suppression. All right, so here's the money. The building plan, so those design drawings I showed you, is about $820,000. The north parking lot, so it's half a parking lot, is about $220,000. Pole barn materials is about $50,000. That brings us to just over $1 million. What we have in hand, so the cash that we have saved up from overages is about $200,000, which means we need about $900,000. And this is the part where I stop talking.
Thank you, Brad. So how do we pay for that stuff? So there's, again, a couple of ways that we can do this. One is we pay as we go. Pay as we go then would mean we phase out each of the things that we are planning on doing in this first set of what Brad just said, which would probably be, we have to start actually with the pole barn, because we have to tear down the garage, but we can't tear down the garage unless we have somewhere to put what's in the garage. So you got to have the pole barn. So we'd put that up, tear down the garage, do the youth room, so that way we can recapture the fellowship hall, so that way when we start the kids department, we have space to move the kids if needed. And so that's kind of how we've been thinking through that process. And so if we paid as we go, we would just have to start ticking off each of those items one at a time. And so, right off the bat, we would be very close to getting pole barn and youth room off right off the bat. But then we'd have to raise the funds to do the children's area, this entrance out here, to get that done. So that's one thing. One way or another, whether we do pay as we go or we do capital campaign, or financing, we are going to do a capital campaign where we are going to ask you to help raise some of these funds by committing something over the next couple of years to help pay for these projects if you deem them worthy to be done. And so if that's the case, we would use those funds to pay off our financing, or we would use those funds to pay as we go these projects. Understand? So we'll do a capital campaign one way or another. We will use those monies to either pay the financing that we get or to pay as we go, one of those two. If we were to do financing, here's where our committee has the capital funding committee, which is separate than the future facility finance committee went to, or is. So we've looked at the different funding options. So if we were to go financing, there are three different ways of doing it. A bank will finance, inside investors, which we'll talk about here in a minute, what that means, or outside investors, people who will, besides a bank, loan us some money to do it, which I don't know too many of them, but certain organizations do. We've looked at a lot of different options. This committee has talked with a lot of different people, and we had a couple of meetings, one very long meeting, and as a result, we have said if we were to move towards the financing option, we would lean or recommend the inside investors route. And what that amounts to is a bond option. And if you don't know what a bond option is, we'll explain that here in the next few minutes. But we would recommend inside investors. Key benefits to the inside investors or this bond option. One of the main ones is this: you can have a fixed interest rate for up to 25 years. No bank will give us a fixed interest rate for 25 years. They may give us a fixed interest rate for 3, right? Is that right, Jim? 3 to 5. And then you just never know where it's going to go from there. This is a very hard chart to read, I understand, but if you go all the way back to 1980 something, you can see interest rates went as high as 22%. We'll pray they never get there ever again, right? Right now, as they stand, they are at 5.25%, which isn't as good as they were if you were wanting to borrow money, but they aren't bad either. And so if you lock in something, you could lock in that 5.25 or 5.9 or whatever for a longer period of time. A second benefit to doing this inside investors or a bond is that there's no prepayment penalty. You can keep paying on the principal as much as you want. You don't get penalized for that. And in addition to that, as you prepay, you can choose the higher interest bonds to pay off first. So that way you're knocking down your interest quicker, which is another benefit of this prepayment is you prepay and you choose which bonds you're paying off first. It's another benefit that they give is an open-ended mortgage. So if we get to the end of this first project, we have a little bit of money left in that we have financed and we haven't paid off, but we'd like to move ahead and do, let's say, the second parking lot and the kitchen or whatever, and we'd like to finance that as well. We can just roll that right on over and keep going with a second mortgage or bond, whichever one you want to refer to it as. Fourth benefit, God's people using God's money to do God's work. We basically use God's people in this whole scenario. We don't go to a bank. We use you, God's people, and family and friends to help do this. Whatever I'm at, funds available quickly. There's a process that we'll talk about how this goes here in just a minute. And then one of the other big benefits is who we pay interest to. If you buy a bond, then we pay interest to you, not to the bank. So you get interest, and it's guaranteed interest until we call your bond. And again, I'll explain what this is in just a minute. I have experience with bonds just because this is what we did in New York when we built a new worship or new auditorium. We did a $500,000 or $600,000 bond. I even purchased one. But moving in this direction was not even my recommendation. It was actually a shock to us that we did go in this direction. The more we got talking and the more we met with people, this began to kind of rise to the top. So where do people find money to invest? So if you were someone, you're like, man, I would like to get in on this. So what it is, okay, if the church needs $900,000, this bond company comes in and they break it down. I'll show you a breakdown here in just a minute as to how many bonds they would need to set or kind of sell. And if you would like to get in on that, where do you get the money to do that? Well, you could take money from your savings account, from different retirement funds, from stock market. They know how to do all of that. You can then purchase a set amount of bonds at a guaranteed interest rate, compound, simple, all this stuff. I'm not into all of that, but I know how it worked for me. But those are the different ways you can do it. Interest rate structures, if you get a 1-year bond, you'll be guaranteed 3%. If you get an 18-year bond, you'll be guaranteed 7% interest unless we pay that bond off early. But until it gets paid off, you'll be getting 7% along the way. And that's kind of been a neat thing for me. When we did ours back in New York, my wife and I bought a bond. It earned us some nice interest at the time. And then when the church paid it off in less than 5 years, the company then said, would you like to reinvest in another church? We said yes. They rolled our bond over into another one, and we kept earning interest off those monies until we needed it for something like buying a car, and then we cashed it in, which was nice. So there's the interest rate. How do bond investments impact the giving to your church? Well, they really shouldn't, because bonds are coming from people's savings or retirements, not from their living expenses and not from what you use to give to the church, right? We all should have, Scripture talks about money set aside out of our monthly income to give back to the Lord, to hopefully express to him the knowledge that he owns everything. We're trying to be good stewards of it, and God is going to use our monies to do his work. The monies for bonds shouldn't affect the giving to the church in any way. Here's a breakdown. So if we needed $1 million in bonds, we would need about 74 people who would need to buy bonds. And this is just a generic, he's just the person who put this together said 2 people to invest $100,000 in bonds. Some of you may have that. I don't know. If you do, talk to me afterwards. Love to chat with you. Maybe you could share a little bit. But, if it's not, then we would need 5 people to do 50 or 50,000, one person do 100. It all works itself out eventually. But 74 people. These 74 people would be those within the church as well as your family and your friends. So my parents in Buffalo, New York could buy a bond, and it would not cost us any extra to have them buy a bond. They're part of my family. My neighbor to my left side, they're my friends. If I told them about that and they wanted to buy a bond, I'm not sure they would, but if they wanted to, they would be a part of that because they're friends. If we do all 74 within house, there is no added expense other than what they charge per, and we'll get, I think I have that on here. If they have to go out, they do have a whole slew of investors who are just waiting on a church to not be able to sell their bonds within house, so that they would then say, hey, I have some money, I'd love to invest in that so I can get some guaranteed interest. Especially in this economy, you just never know. So people love guaranteed interest. So how does this all work? Well, the first phase is preparing the soil. This is where all documents are completed. You have nothing to worry about on here. You don't have to do any of this work. Financial secretary, treasurer, and myself would have to do a lot of this. But here's phase 1. Takes about a month to complete. Phase 2 is the publicity stage. This is where we sow the seed. Again, about another month, where letters are mailed, phone calls are made, announcements are made, brochures are put in bulletins, and so on. And then we have an actual informational meeting where this company comes in and they present to you the information to an even broader stage. And then phase 3 is reaping the harvest, local placement. This is Bond Information Sunday, complete local placement, release unsold bonds to retail brokerage division. Again, that's if we can't sell all of them. And that's what they would do. They would help us to move through each of these phases. There is a percentage, if we sell all of them ourselves, there's a small percentage, I can't remember off the top of my head, but if we have to go outside, I think it's another like 2% for every dollar that they have to get outside of this. So this would be our recommendation to move ahead. If we were to do financing, to move towards a bond rather than a bank. Okay, that's our recommendation. We're not saying that we recommend financing. That's a church decision. We were tasked with the job of what would be the best financing option if we have to do financing. And this is what we believe to be the best financing option out there for us when you put all of those together, okay? So let me give you quickly where we are currently financially, because maybe you're wondering, okay, how are we can we even do something like this? 2017 giving, our total giving for the year, $734,774. 2018, we dipped a decrease of $15,600, okay? And from 2000, I will say, if my memory serves me right, from 2016 to 2017 was a slight decrease as well. Not a lot, but a slight decrease. Our expenses, 2017 was $667,404. That 2018 should be up on the next column, and that is $654,000 for our expenses this past year, which is a decrease of $23,000 in expenses. But one of the things we do have to remember is that much of that is due to not paying additional pastor's salary and benefits from September through December, okay? So when you're not paying a full-time salary and health insurance, those things add up quickly, all right? So probably close to $20,000 of that is salary savings, okay? So surplus, last year was a $59,500 surplus. This year, we're not completely done, so when we come back with the final numbers, we're still finishing that, and it doesn't say $62,000 surplus. Don't yell at me or Jim. These are just preliminary numbers, right, Jim? I asked Jim just to give me some preliminary stuff right now. That's $22,000 of that from unused pastor's salary. So we still had a surplus of $40,000 or so, which is a good thing. Praise the Lord for that, and we'll obviously have to bring some recommendations as to what to do with those funds here in the next month or so. So for next week, again, what are we wanting to do? Let's bring it back. We started with this, we want to end with this. We want to have some time for discussion and addressing any questions or concerns. All right, if you have some and you're like, oh man, I'm going to forget it before next week, email it to me now, text it to me now. We'll have contact information up here in just a minute. Or Brad, let us know now. We'll address it next week. We may be able to sneak in a couple questions here before we end. And then we want to vote to move ahead with current adjusted building plans, what Brad presented to you. Those plans with the youth room, the children's, the new entryway, not enclosing the courtyard, but just doing what we talked about this morning. And then vote to move ahead with financing the project or paying for it phase at a time, cash in hand. That's a decision that you, the church body, need to make. Do we finance or do we go phase at a time, cash at hand? And so if you do have questions, there's our contact information. You can email it or text it. I do believe Brad will accept your text, so.
Next slide.
Next slide, yeah, real quick, move. But if you do send that to him, Brad has been real helpful to me by way of the building side of things, and I appreciate just his work that he's been doing for that side of it for me. It's freed me up tremendously, so I appreciate his work there. Any questions? We have a few minutes. I do want to take any questions. I know we've fired a lot of information at you. Yes? Yes, yeah. So what she was saying, if we sell all the bonds in-house, that decreases the ultimate interest, the final interest rate that we get, up to possibly a percentage. And then we actually do set the rates for all the bonds as well. We can, in there, we have a little bit of wiggle room to set it from 2 to 3 to 4% on out to 7 or whatever, so.
So we actually set bond rates, and it's not based on demand. Normal bond sale would be based on.
Correct. No, we would set that, yeah, yep.
What kind of time frame does a bond sale like this encompass?
So they would kind of introduce what their breakdown, so based on our numbers, they would break down what bonds would be available to sell. They would then get that to us, the church family. They then ask for people who are interested and in what kind of bonds they're interested in, so that way they can compile those numbers, so that not everybody will get what they want, but everybody will get close to what they want. They don't want to leave people out.
I'm wondering a time frame. If we say we're going to go ahead with this option, are we looking at 3 months to a bond sale?
It will be, earliest would be 3 months to when they start selling, because it'll take a month to get the paperwork done, a month for us to kind of advertise stuff, and then a month for them to kind of come in here, explain it to everybody more clearly than I did, and then meet with people. They will meet with you one-on-one. They will be right here meeting with you. Or if, like, my parents wanted to buy one from Buffalo, they will set up a conference call with them and do that right here at the church. Yeah. Yep. Let me go back to that, because I've heard several people comment on this. So when you look at the brochure, and I'd encourage you, the brochures that we put together for future planning, they're in the foyer out there. Those are plans for 2019 through 2023, okay? So some of those things that are in there we may not even get to. Some of them we may not even get to until 2023. Something like that is a long-range plan based on a lot of discussion from a lot of different people, including you, right? All right. Any other question? Yes, Jim?
Brad, the bathrooms down in the children's wing that are right off the hallway, will they be inside the secure area now?
No, they would remain basically where they're at and how they are. The idea was to open up that space by pushing those little bathrooms that are occupying that larger space right in the middle, push those north, kind of align all the plumbing. There's some plumbing interior work already there, so we just push it up there. The children's bathrooms would then be inside the secured area.
So there would be another set back to back. So there'd be bathrooms on the outside and inside back to back. Yeah, Jeremy?
Not really. We got a quote to do it both ways, and they basically just cut their number in half. So there wasn't a real savings as to doing the whole thing at once. And, asphalt costs will vary, season to season. We got that quote this year, but no, not necessarily a savings for doing the whole thing.
It's a good question, though. Yeah, Judd? Sure. So part of that would be what would come in like a capital campaign that would hopefully move us along faster in a shorter period of time. So right now, we say about 200,000. We have more than that, but we need some of that up front to just get, if we were to go financing route to do that, and to do some of like the pole barn to get that done like right now. But like we aren't stocking a ton of money away towards building fund now. People still give to it, but it's not at a great rate. So probably per month, I'm guessing $500 to $700. 7,000? Oh, no. What is being given now per month towards building fund? Yes, less than 1,000 per month is being given. And we would need between 7 and 8, depending on how much we borrowed. So, but if we did a capital campaign, we would be hopefully bringing in more than $1,000 per month for 3 years. I don't know what that would be. Yeah. Right now, nothing of real value, just because it's, there's some wood stage pieces that are out there.
Yeah, one of the biggest things about getting that garage out of there is if we expand the footprint of the youth room,
Yeah.
you need somewhere to drive, and it would really constrain when you come around that corner.
Now we do it in the parking lot, we just shut that whole side down.
Yeah. The other thing we want to do is if we do the pole barn, there would be additional storage to move some of the staging pieces that are in this storage area or this storage area and get it out there. So that way our guys that do work around the building have a better place for them to kind of set up shop, so to speak. I keep hearing that a lot, so. But there's not a lot out there right now. All right? Again, if you have more questions, email, text, bring them next week. We will continue to talk about them. We want to move ahead with confidence and with unity. We don't want to do anything that is going to disrupt the unity, and so we want you to be confident in this, and so if whatever we need to do to help in that, please let us know. Let's close in a word of prayer, okay? God, thank you this morning that we even have the opportunity to talk about this, and God, we recognize you don't need our buildings to do your work. You don't need our money to do your work. You can do whatever you want, when you want it, in the way that you want it. And so God, help us as we move ahead to recognize that we're just trying to be good stewards of what you have given to us. You've given to us this building to be used for your work. And so we just want to make sure that we're caring for it as best as we can. You've given us kids to minister to, and we want to make sure that we are providing for them the best safety that we can for them, and the best care that we can give them while they are here with us. And so, God, help us as we think about this stuff presented this morning, and again, have time to do so next Sunday, that we would continue to maintain a unity here, because we are trying to think of things from your perspective. And God, we want to be in your will, and so we recognize that in the counsel of many, there is great wisdom, and so give us wisdom as we all think and discuss and interact with this information. God, help us to share what we need to share, so that way we feel like we're a part of this process, and we ask it in Christ's name. Amen. Thank you for giving us your attention. Go grab some coffee.